tell if this looks good. I need my glasses. That there was more affordable or accessible help, support in the world. I wish there was less trauma to begin with. I wish people were traumatized less. I wish less harm was done to children. Say that I didn't have huge trauma as a child, but I don't think that's true anymore. Just because there were certain things or an instance where I was deeply traumatized, and it's a little less. I don't think I recognized it as trauma because it was more neglect, and I think I looked at my sister and what she went through and saw, like, that's real trauma. Like, I can understand that, but I think that the silent sort of trauma here was that I was the one probably that tried to hold everyone's pain, tried to be the one that was sort of steady and happy and didn't make a fuss and didn't say what I needed. And it wasn't a decision that I made, it was instances in life and circumstances that really showed this body that there was no room and no space for me. So the only logical thing for this body was to shut down or detach and try to be something that was that didn't take up too much room in the household, you know, because there was too much pain. There was too much pain. And so I always felt like I didn't have that much trauma. And I don't know if I've ever... I know that I recognize it now, but I don't think that I ever recognized it when I was an adult. I always kind of was like, you know, I got my shit together, even though I didn't. And, you know, I'm skimming over a lot. There were a lot of instances where I did need people's help, and I was neglected again. Like, it was just the same pattern. And it was so painful to constantly have that repeated from the same people, because they were in so much pain. And only now do I recognize how deep the pain actually was. Like, I knew they were traumatized, but only now do I, because I felt my own pain, I'm like, damn, they were really, really suffering. So I know that they couldn't have done any different, and I know that they literally didn't have any space for me. Because even in those moments when they seemed okay, it was just because the pain was locked down well enough to act okay for that instance, but they weren't okay. But I think in those moments when they were okay and I was going through one of the most difficult times of my life and they couldn't see me, like, not only was it reminiscent of my childhood and how I was treated then, it was just a confirmation that I didn't matter. My pain didn't matter. And even though I was showing it, not all of it, but I was showing it, it still wasn't received. I really hesitate to say details of my family story because, like, I've thought about this here and there. I want to be respectful of their part of the story. I want to express how it affected this body because it is part of my story, and I do have the right to express that as well. But currently, I'm not sure if I'm completely comfortable yet, so I think it's the way that I share it. I think I have to be selective about the information that I do say. That's very particular to me, I suppose. But even then, I'm like, but it's their stuff that I'm exposing. Because it deeply affected me. It's their trauma so deeply directly affected me. And the other trauma on top of that was that I never recognized that I was the holder of their trauma. And I just didn't recognize that in itself was the trauma. That kind of suppression and neglect and abandonment of self and abandonment from my own family. That is abandonment, you know? I felt like I just didn't exist in a way. And I'm not saying I got the basics. I did. Okay, I'm not gonna compare trauma stories. Oh my god. I'm just gonna own my story. And it was what it was. There were a lot of good parts. My parents were good parents. Now more than ever do, you know, I recognize so deeply that they tried so hard, and yeah, they really tried really hard. It's just that a lot of it was coming from conditioning and cultural things, and not seeing things clearly, and not knowing what a child needs, not having processed some of your pain so that it doesn't directly get expressed or put onto your children. You know, they didn't work on their stuff, but I understand. I can see that they came from a country where they grew up during war, and yeah, my dad grew up with no parents. I mean, I can't even imagine that. And some of the things that ensued after that, you know, it's like no one raised him. How did he even survive? Honestly, I'm just like, the fact that he's alive and the fact that he is the way that he is, I'm amazed. Even just that, I'm like, god damn, that's an achievement on its own, you know? So I get it. Like, I get that they were in survival, like complete survival, but not only that, a depth of trauma. Yeah, there's so much mixed in there, you know? But anyways, I suppose it is nice at least to truly recognize the depth of trauma that neglect causes, and that it's not as recognizable. It's not as obvious, I suppose. And you know how things just become more and more obvious, like in general. As you're going through this, yeah, this is one of the things I'm like, oh my god, that was a lot. Oh my god, that really affected me. That really affected all my relationships. That really affected how I continue to neglect myself in all of these different ways. And I tried so hard to not do that. And yes, there were maybe subtle improvements, but only through this death. I'm just talking about my own experience because that's all I have. But through this death, it was the only way that I just fucking stopped, because I had no choice, you know? The body was so depleted and exhausted. I couldn't play those roles. I couldn't be there for people. I couldn't. And then all I could feel was the immense guilt and shame underneath for not being who I thought I was or should be, or was. It was so painful. I mean, one of the most painful parts was not being able to be there for my dad. That's where the original, like, dismissal of myself began. Yeah, so I didn't realize like how much this had affected this body until probably more recently, just because so much had unraveled now that I could see the base foundation of it. there was a moment when I was young, and I don't remember how old I was, but I was a child, and I had a school assignment of, I think, get to know or interview your hero, and I chose my dad, and he told me his whole story, his whole life story, and I could sense now that a child should not have heard all the details that he told me. And a child has no context, and all I saw was my dad sobbing as he was telling his whole story with such intricate details. And when I say sobbing, to this day, I don't think I've seen anybody cry that profoundly. The anguish on his face was traumatizing itself. The amount of pain and grief that he had gone through and that he was holding, a child doesn't know what to do with that. And so I think in that moment, as I was sobbing as well, I think I shut part of it down or held some of it in, because a child doesn't know how to process any of that. And so I remember in that moment that I wanted to help him, save him, or feel his pain for him, or carry the pain for him, or live for him, try to be the best for him, not cause him any more pain, not put any of my pain onto him, basically not be a burden. And that's what I did my whole life to almost everybody. I was scared of putting my own pain onto anybody. And the truth is, I couldn't anyways. That's what I was shown over and over, especially by my family members for different reasons. Again, they were just in so much pain and unavailable, But yeah, when I died with my friend, I think he was the only one that I felt safe and comfortable enough to truly say everything to. It completely transformed my life and everything, because up until that point, I didn't trust anybody. Not to that depth. I didn't even know that I didn't trust people, because it was so foreign to me to feel held and supported and to be shown that my pain matters, that it was actually legit, and that I didn't have to be pretend strong anymore. It was really slow and incremental. It took a long time to trust him too, and in general, I think it should take time to trust people. But yeah, it took so long, because I don't think I've ever trusted anybody. there's such an important and pivotal part of the family story that it doesn't have to be said, but it's so pivotal, it's so important, and so you would understand the depth of pain of the whole family if you heard what happened. It just kind of was a I just have this image of like a wooden splinter thing that's been hammered in a tree or something, and it completely, like, from that point on, it's completely fractured and it's wounded in such a dramatic way. It has a cascade effect. That wound never healed. It's like it's permanently frozen that way. I don't know why it comes out that way, because honestly, I kind of feel healed, but within the family, yeah, they're not healed. I think anybody in my family watches my videos, but I really I hope. I don't think I'm saying anything that bad, am I? So yeah, since I didn't recognize my own pain and my own trauma and how that deeply wired my body to neglect myself and not be able to speak up for myself, not be able to say what I want, honor what I want, like respect it in any way, it's more like actually I was so used to denying it, so familiar with that felt like natural. And so you could imagine, like, also I was attracted to not very healthy people who could take advantage. Because I remember some people who were kind in my life, but I don't think that I was truly attracted to them at the time. But I was attracted to those that were deeply wounded. And what happened is just this body was taken advantage of like crazy. It was so bad. It was so traumatizing. So it was just the trauma layered on top of more trauma. Me not knowing what and why, and blaming myself probably a lot and not really understanding any of it. You know, for the first time not really wanting to live anymore just because it was just so difficult to exist. And then I turned to spirituality and heard of this thing called enlightenment, and I don't think I chased it. Like, it sounded interesting, but I don't think that I was chasing that. I think I was chasing health. I wanted to heal in every way, probably first physically, because I cared about that the most at the time. And I didn't really know that emotional or inner healing is where the root of it all is, and the physical is not that important, or it's a side effect. But anyways, that was my entry point, and I suppose over time I got more and more in touch with internal stuff, but it was slow. it was really, really slow, because you do everything before you go into the body. You try everything. You do and try everything. That's the last thing you really want to do. Actually feel things. So, but yeah, then, you know, the journey of coming back home to the body actually did start to begin. Oh my gosh. I didn't know I was gonna tell the whole story of my life. I just wanted to emphasize how damaging neglect is. Maybe I want to speak for those that have experienced something similar, and I want you to know that it wasn't nothing, that it really did affect you in big ways, and that yeah, it's a big type of trauma. That should be sort of recognized as such, but oh my god, so much of life makes so much more sense. And going through this, like, nothing makes sense, because so much that you thought made sense is falling away. Like, so much that you knew, so much of the ways that the body used to function, so much of who you thought you were, who you should be to others, who you thought other people were, what was real, what wasn't, who was trustworthy, who wasn't. Like, all of it keeps changing and shifting, like, depending on how it's perceived, and everything's questioned, and it's like all crumbling, and sometimes you don't know what's what. But I mean, you'll have little glimmers of like things sort of making more sense. But I feel like now the nonsense of it all makes absolute sense. Like, everything just makes sense now. The catastrophe of it all. How horrifically sad the whole thing is makes sense somehow. And I think it's because in all of these ways, all of my perspectives just like kept dying, kept being seen and emerging and then disappearing, and I saw that I don't know anything, and I'm the same as everyone, just to a different degree and a different flavor and a different way. And I don't mean that precisely. I know that there are really harmful people in the world, and I'm not saying that I am that. I'm just saying that it comes from the same, like the root of it comes from the same. I think that's kind of my assumption, or what I feel is like it comes from the same wound, the same separation, the same moment where we lost ourselves, detached ourselves, learned how to survive in this cruel world and environment, and we left ourselves. We left the body. We stopped feeling. We stopped looking inward, and then we started to look outward. What to fix, how to be, what to do, who to be in this world, and how to get love that way, or acceptance, or just don't get beaten up. Just be quiet and don't make a scene, don't make a fuss, and that's how you get love. Or why is this van like circling this graveyard? It is so hot right now, it's crazy. Because it was freezing a couple days ago. So how to end this video? What was I gonna say? Maybe I just wanted to honor my story in that way, because that's kind of this subtle energy that it came to me recently and showed me what neglect actually truly did, in such a clearer way. And in a way I saw how fucked up it was, and in a way there was a depth of understanding of why it was the way it was, and why my dad, and I've never felt so much acceptance for their pain. You know, I recognize that there's a lot of pride in my dad. I can see that it's a protection mechanism. And yet maybe that's what got him through life. That's what allowed him to survive. He's very stubborn in certain ways. He's very soft and nurturing and loving in other ways. He was a good dad in a lot of ways. He gave us a lot of love and attention when he could. I think he really loved children. There's a real sweetness and tenderness in him, but it goes to the other extreme as well. There was a lot of verbal abuse. I know that I say all this stuff neutrally. I just feel a little cautious saying it publicly because I don't know how people will take it, and I think maybe I just need to preface and say, like, I'm not angry at anyone, and I know that everyone's traumatized, and I know that everyone was really doing their best, meaning they only had the abilities at the time was what it was, and it affected me in the way that it did. And that's it. So there really is a neutrality to all of it. how I want to conclude this. I think I want to walk around though, because I haven't done that in a while, and it is so nice